Hello, and welcome to my elaborate guide to eating the rich. We're taking the concept of a class war very seriously today. So as proud middle-class soldiers of the Norian army, ignoring the literal royals in our midst, we can't allow either the aristocrats that own this decadent abode, or the peasant robbers that got here before us to run away with a single ounce of cash. If you're not filching what I'm putting down, today we're taking a close look at one of Fire Emblem Fates Conquest's optional chapters, namely Paralogue 22, Abrupt Clash, sometimes referred to as Nina's Paralogue or simply Ninalog, after the boss and recruitable child unit, Nina. Ninalog is a map that sounds incredible on paper. The objective is to rout the enemy before Nina escapes, but that's a bit misleading as to how the map actually plays out. All the red units will start fleeing to the escape points once there are no lock-touch enemies remaining on the map. That means Nina and 3 specific outlaws. Each of them will immediately start gunning for the nearest chest, followed by the nearest escape point once they finish looting it. The only one you absolutely have to kill is Nina, but if the other 3 escape, you won't be able to get the treasure they're holding. So if you're playing for side objectives, the map is a mad dash to lock down those 4 slippery thieves before they escape and take your well-deserved loot with them. The hardest of these is the western one, who can leave as early as turn 7 if he's promoted. For comparison, the others only leave by turn 9 at the soonest, while being much less off the beaten path. Whether you catch them or not, the other enemies will start fleeing regardless, as they don't make a distinction between the outlaws dying or escaping, which sidesteps the usual tedium of route maps by making it so you don't actually have to fight everyone, and adds an additional challenge if you want the experience. That's a great concept for a map, and a brilliant way to increase the difficulty based on how much you value certain side objectives. On the extreme end of the spectrum, if you're literally only concerned with beating the map, you can entrap and kill Nina turn 1 and spam end turn so you don't have to engage with the rest of the map. That's not something I would recommend, but it's indicative of the sheer number of options at your disposal. To top it all off, there's even 2 distinct paths you can take, a frontal assault and a sneaky back route, both of which overlap Nina's and at least one other chest gremlin's pathing, giving you incentive to split your army without overly punishing players who stuck with one or the other. Ninalog ticks almost all the boxes on the good map design checklist. So why is it that I've always had such mixed feelings about it? I'd say the reason for that comes down to these tight 2-tile wide hallways. Both sides of the map feature these long winding passages with very little room to diverge. If you take the back route, you've committed to the left hallway for the entire vertical stretch of the map, and then some. Compare this to something like Chapter 18, which, despite featuring similar geometry, gives you a lot more freedom to move between sections of the map. Positioning in these areas is pretty unengaging, but the enemy makeup is varied and non-trivial enough to where you still need to pay close attention to your tactics, which is a really unfortunate balance to strike, especially since they're the parts of the map that feature the time-sensitive side objectives. It's mostly an endurance check, and you can see how that could become frustrating if you discover partway through that you didn't bring enough juice from the start. Luckily, you have a number of ways of dealing with this to enjoy the excellent foundation of this map to the fullest, so I'd like to dig into that nuance and uncover the fun to be found in this manner. If you're familiar with my content, you'll be aware that I just wrapped up one series of pre-planned Conquest clears and am laying the groundwork for a second one. This is neither. This is a standalone clear I'm making for the purpose of audience testing a slightly different format. I've become a lot more familiar with the kind of channel I want this to be after realizing how much I have to say from my perspective as an experienced player. Specifically, if other Fates channels have the goal of introducing casual players to Lunatic difficulty, my job is to take you a step beyond that. Lunatic Conquest is a game mode that heavily benefits from the game knowledge accrued from multiple repeated playthroughs, learning several different methods to beat each of its tightly assigned maps and which you prefer, as there truly are a cornucopia of viable options at your disposal. Beating that difficulty only once, or in the same way every time, tells you almost nothing about what strategies work best for accomplishing your goals, especially considering everyone's goals are different, so one player's strategy will never work for everyone. The key factor to mastering this game is experimentation. However, experimentation is also a significant time investment, so it's unreasonable to expect every player to learn this game inside and out like that. My solution? I'd like to distill that time investment and go over as many different strategies in a short time as I can to improve your tactical decision making, by opening your eyes to the possibilities. It'll also be a great opportunity to talk more deeply through my thought process, such as why I use the strategies I do in comparison to other things I could be doing. So what better place to test that format than a paralogue? Paralogues in this game are optional chapters unlocked after certain units attain an S support. You can play these maps at almost any time if you're choosing, and the enemies will scale up or down to match. Paralogue design at its core makes explicit what is implicit in the main story chapters, that no 2 clears of one map will ever be the same. While I'll be structuring this video with one specific clear as the focal point, I'll make sure to detail and showcase several other approaches and how the map can change depending on when you play it. A process that's already started, as you might have noticed. I'll still only scratch the surface of what's possible, because otherwise this video would be 80 hours long, but hopefully this will get the gears in your brain turning whenever you play this map yourself. Our protagonist clear of the day takes place after Chapter 14, so still pretty early in Conquest campaign. Nina's father, Niles, joins in the second real chapter of the game, Chapter 8, and many of his popular spouses, particularly Nyx and Mozu, and to a lesser extent the Wyverns, are also early joiners. This makes Ninalog one of the first Paralogues you're likely to unlock. This is a surprisingly rare distinction, as the next earliest Norian dad to join is Laszlo in Chapter 12, which is a very noticeable gap. However, for whatever reason, I don't hear nearly as many recommendations to play Ninalog early compared to Persylog, Ophelialog, or the shared route Paralogues. Likely because the rewards from it aren't typically considered as valuable. Now, I'm not usually the type to play Paralogues this early in general, but I do feel it's a bit of a shame that this has left early Ninalog clears in the dust, especially considering I think the rewards here are genuinely great. So here, I've paired Niles with one of his earliest possible wives, namely Effie, to see what early Ninalog has in store for us. When deciding on marriage pairings, a good rule of thumb is to come up with ones that benefit the mother, father, and child, assuming you're planning on using all three. Effie x Niles definitely qualifies. Niles loves Effie's para while she's in Knight, and Nina benefits from Effie's genes. In addition to the most important optimization, cat and hair color, she also gains a lot of strength inheritance, and the potential to grab useful skills like Quick Draw, Certain Blow, or in this case the lower investment Defense +2. Meanwhile, literally every female unit except for exactly Nyx benefits greatly from marrying Niles and gaining access to the rare Outlaw class line, as Effie has done here. Move +1 and Lucky 7 are two of the best skills in the entire game, and Bow Knight is a solid long-term combat class if you don't have any other plans. Obviously, that makes Niles' marriage highly contested, which is great news for the girl who doesn't need to compete for it incidentally, though marrying for skills isn't as flashy as marrying for something like Wyvern, so it isn't discussed as often as it really should be, something I even fell victim to. This isn't the best Niles pairing for any specific niche, but it's a solid option if his other wives are already accounted for, and I'm ashamed I didn't bring it up sooner when I had the chance. My goal for the main clear is to route the map in as few turns as possible with good reliability. Not the game's definition of route, I mean killing every enemy that appears on the map, so I can't let anyone escape. And since the last reinforcements appear at the end of turn 7, an 8-turn clear is the absolute fastest I can make it. For demonstration purposes, this team is intentionally designed around accomplishing that objective, which is a major advantage I'll be upfront about here and a luxury you won't have in a real run. However, I made sure to keep things very achievable. For instance, I've matched everyone to Nina's level, while in practice you'll probably be a bit higher than that due to how the XP curve and paralog scaling works out. Everyone has their average stats, but to give a bit of wiggle room, I chose not to cook a meal this clear. Otherwise, I'll also make sure to talk about other approaches if your team isn't as tailor-made for this map as mine, or if you don't care about my overly ambitious self-imposed side objectives. If you're still concerned, don't worry, this legitimately obtained Nintendo PC team isn't a part of this format I intend to carry over to my planned future series. It's just for the convenience of this standalone video. Anyway, that should be enough context, so let's send our calling card and steal Nina's greatest treasure. First priority is finding a way to approach this central room. It's theoretically skippable, and that's one of the easier ways of simply beating the map, but not for my purposes of a fast route, and intentionally avoiding it severely limits your options for obtaining the rightmost treasures. What's initially tricky about this formation is just how large it is, and how these enemies put a lot of pressure on the entrance where you start. This isn't the kind of formation you can wipe out in one turn. Based on that, you might be tempted to approach this room from above to catch them where they're less prepared, but maneuvering all the way over there unfortunately takes so long that they might already be fleeing by the time you get there. That might be what you want, but it harms me a lot more than it helps me. Frontal assault it is then, and since some amount of enemy phase combat is inevitable based on its large size, that'll be our opener. With that approach, we can use these thieves' multi-pronged assault against them. By sending multiple enemy phasers to different sides of the room, we can thin out a big portion of their attackers immediately without exposing ourselves to too much risk. The left and right sides are protected by bow-wielding outlaws, so two of those enemy phasers can and should be speedy bow users themselves. Outlaws have basically identical stat lines to ninjas, attacking at range to boot, so their best counters are mostly the same as well, doubling bow users and dual-striking hand axe users, especially since, like Chapter 17, there's plenty of opportunity to fight them from the other side of walls, even when they do have unrestricted 1-2 range. Though do note, there is slightly more nuance because of the different place in the weapon triangle. In my case, I'm using Niles and a promoted Selena for them. Niles opens the front door, gets sung to, and takes point, while Selena can use her 8 movement and this breakable wall to get into position immediately. The optimal tiles for this are at the edge of the Shining Bow Outlaws' ranges, which lets you kill both them and the Steel Bow ones at once. This is actually a bit easier after the enemies promote, since they'll have more movement, so the optimal tiles will be closer to you. It even lets you player face a hero while you're at it, though you will expose yourself to a general if you do so be careful. That's the sides handled, but we'll be in big trouble if we let the central enemies spill out, so we need to deal with them too. Luckily, these candelabras set up an extremely convenient choke point that lets us funnel them into the unit of our choice. Ideally, a fast one, with good mixed bulk, so they can handle both the mercenaries and this Shining Bow Outlaw. Nina won't attack. A strong Master Ninja is a solid choice, especially if their backpack is mounted, as a 9-move unit, say a mount with a ninja's movement pair-up, can reach the choke point in a single action if you put them at one of the 2 closest deployment slots. Those deployment slots were already taken up by Niles and Azura though, so instead I'll either have to use Corrin's fixed deployment slot, which I can't in this case, or shelter Azura to sing to someone else, so I'll commit to the latter action. The other best enemy phase class for this situation is a Dark Knight. Dark Knight isn't as fast as Master Ninja, but fights the mercenaries a bit better in my experience, has Heartseeker to counteract this pillar tile, and you're a lot more likely to have one that fits the bill since you get one for free, Leo. Leo has almost everything he needs to fulfill this role right at base. Sans the speed, but you have several good speed backpacks and Azura's inspiring song to get him over the threshold relatively easily. He's who I'd normally use for this. Unfortunately, he's in very high demand elsewhere on the map in my case, so I'll have to resort to a backup Dark Knight. The shoo-ins for that role would be Odin and Nyx, the other base Dark Mages, but they can be a bit disappointing statistically, in offense and bulk respectively. Niles is actually a shockingly great pick, since he has great speed and resistance, respectable magic and defense, and has Dark Mage as his Heart Seal. I'm genuinely a huge fan of this build, though there is an opportunity cost to giving up a fast bow user for that, which is itself in very high demand both on this map and throughout the early game. If only there was some other unit with a similar stat line who also has Dark Mage as their Heart Seal. Hey, wait a minute! Look who's been staring me in the face this entire time. It's Dark Knight Peri! Yes, the unit who famously has a 0 magic base and a minuscule magic growth is who I'll be using as my primary mage in the central room. Now, this basically only works because I'm playing this map early. If I let the enemy scale a bit more, Peri's magic would be supremely outclassed. But with Dark Knight's class bases and the numerous stat stacking tools available to her, including Odin pair-up and a +5 damage stack from Elverum and Malefic Aura, she can handily reach the benchmark she needs against, for instance, this mercenary, which she'll kill on player phase now. And from that, oh look, Bloodthirst activated. Now she has +4 magic and speed, just in time to deal with a fast, resistant outlaw and enemy phase. Yep, Bloodthirst buffs magic for some inexplicable reason. Her skills give her an actual, genuine, unironic magic lead over an equivalently leveled Odin at this point in the game, which is frankly hilarious. Less facetiously, though not facetiously, both her and Niles' stat lines, particularly in speed resistance, let them contribute in ways neither Odin nor Nyx can replicate this clear. Life is so beautiful. Moving right along, our second priority is finding a way to tackle this left hallway. In casual playthroughs, I often fully ignore this side of the map until later, but since turn count is a concern, I can't do that here, and I am forced to split my army. It's not exactly a secret which units I'll be sending that way at this point, but let's see why I've chosen these 3 for this, starting with Effie. Effie is actually not that important in the grand scheme of this clear. I chose her so I had an excuse to talk about her, but the only real requirement for this deployment slot is a second Lock Touch user, so you could completely substitute her with Kaze if you wanted. But yes, Lock Touch is solely to open this back door. However, you don't technically have to do that to engage with this side of the map. Another option available to you is Lunge. If you lure this outlaw over on turn 1 and use Lunge on turn 2, you can phase through solid matter and end up on the opposite side of the map. Unfortunately, Lunge is a Wyvern skill, and Wyverns have a really bad time fighting this guy. Since he has Lucky 7 and obviously bows, a Hand Axe Wyvern will be very inaccurate and punished heavily for missing. Grounded Lunge users will fare much better, but outside of inheritance edge cases, that probably means you reclass someone out of Wyvern, which, fun fact, isn't a class you usually want to leave. Though there are reasons to do so. It's a good excuse to go skill dipping in something like Berserker or Bow Knight, for instance, if you're playing this map around the time you're aiming for level 15 skills. So it's a perfectly valid move, just a constraint on team building I was unable to fulfill. It's a little easier to lunge into the right hallway, since the outlaws there aren't as dodgy, especially with the Shining Bow's avoid reduction. And there are more of them, so you can lunge more than a single pair of units. That's the fastest way to catch up to the lower right outlaw, and essentially the only way to get the right side's treasure without engaging the central room, besides in trap, but I obviously have chosen to take the intended path there in full force. Both instances of lunging out of the starting room skip a large group of enemies. Obviously, there are many reasons you might want to do that, but given the objective of the map, that will make you bleed some turns as you either double back for them or wait for them to escape on their own, which obviously is not an option for me. So let's end Leo that way and see what happens. I know my audience is smart, so you've already put 2 and 2 together and deduced my solution to the western hallway. Namely, throw Leo at everything. Under these circumstances, that just works, and it's not particularly complicated either, but that leaves a disproportionate amount on the cutting room floor, so I refuse to leave it at that. Now that you know what I settled on, the following turns of this hallway subplot will work backwards from there to see if that was the right choice.
Was that all?
Just in case I had to be stated, no, I am explicitly not recommending you use magical Dark Knight Peri. It is wholeheartedly a meme build, and the main reason I'm using it here is because it's funny. I actually don't hate it in the short term, primarily as a skill dip for Heartseeker, but without a significant amount of investment, it is going to fall off. And in most cases, it'll be strictly outclassed by several much easier options. We're clear on that? Okay, good. Now that that's out of my system, I'm going to refrain from saying anything negative about Peri for the rest of the video, because frankly, I just love to see my girl winning. Keep in the back of your mind if you hate fun for sure. But otherwise, let's just enjoy the Peri dimension for a while. Yes, it's a meme build, but it's the kind of meme build you could make an actual argument for with enough of an agenda. And her unique traits match up eerily well against this specific map at this specific point in the game. The world simply needs to know this information, so my hands are tied.
I guess that's it.
Told you I was tough.
That was good for me.
What a fool.
Jakob wants to fight 2 outlaws through the wall over the course of the next 3 turns. I purposefully unequipped Res plus 2 so they would use the Shining Bow against him, reducing their avoid to give Jakob perfect hit. A defense tonic would have served the same purpose, but this option is funnier, and therefore more optimal. The Steel Shuriken debuff lets him 2 rounds, and in case you're wondering, there's no downside to him critting here, besides stealing some experience from himself. That was a really solid turn 1. All that immediate progress makes clearing out the rest of the central room a lot easier. First up are these 3 knights. The center one with Inspiration is like the faux boss of this map. He's slightly higher level and promotes 1 chapter earlier than everyone else, and we're going to want to kill him first so he stops buffing his teammates. If you're playing this map after he promotes, be careful. He'll have 1 extra movement and be able to attack your choke pointer turn 1. Thankfully, this is actually a blessing in disguise if you used a Dark Knight. It'd be a lot harder to one-round him with his increased bulk as a general, but since he helpfully chips himself down on enemy phase and moves to where you can easily dual strike against him, it's much less of an issue. He's unpromoted in this case, which is also good because it means Beruka can just one-shot him with the hammer.
Done.
So here's Nyx. As you probably know, Shining Bow Nyx is my personal pet project unit of choice, but that traditionally involves an early reclass to Outlaw. In this hypothetical playthrough, that wasn't an option, since Mozu and Peri already stole Nyx's heart, Seals. So here's the backup plan if your early Heartseal economy is similarly tight. Nyx is capable of attaining an ace thwart with Mozu by Chapter 13, which lets her friendship seal into Archer just in time to one-round flyers there and on the following Chapter 14. That allows you to speedrun her bow rank up to D without going too out of your way, especially if you take healthy advantage of dual strikes. From there, you can, but don't necessarily have to, use the Chapter 13 arm scroll on her, which I'd argue this style of Nyx is one of the best recipients of, to give her Shining Bow access, regaining the use of her magic stat. More on that later. I'd go way more in depth on this option if this video was actually about Nyx, but for now, I just wanted to give a proper overview to this build I'd only mentioned in passing previously, just in case anyone was under the impression Nyx needed an early Heartseal to function. She doesn't, it's just a big help. There are a few advantages this route has over Instant Outlaw, one of which we can see here, Quick Draw, which secures the skill where Outlaw would not.
You didn't have to do that.
The remaining enemies in the corners are an interesting bunch. Fighters and knights, and especially the promoted berserkers and generals, are some of the hardest enemy types to sweep on enemy phase because of, respectively, their high damage and crit, and bulk with Worry Fighter. They, and the central knights, are designed to punish you for overextending turn 1. They'll murder a standard soul ninja, for example, and keep up the pressure on subsequent turns. Contrary to what you might expect, all 5 of the corner enemies have linked AI with each other, so if you aggro one, the others will catch you in a pincer. If I'm playing this map later on, I'll probably have an extremely mobile army, so I can save myself the hassle and just bum rush them. I don't have that luxury with this early game squad, so I'll start by luring them closer with Selena and Peri. Strictly speaking, I only need one of them for that, but this keeps enemy movement consistent. As we've established, Leo's juggernauting this side of the map. Juggernauts are at their best as flank units, taking the weight of the side paths off your main army so they can focus on making forward progress. This doesn't tend to demand much from them moment to moment, but tests their self-sufficiency like nothing else. On Niles, this hallway takes that to an extreme. The enemies are spread out such that you will never fight more than 4 guys in one enemy phase like you might on something like Forest Log, but the sheer war of attrition more than makes up for it. You're isolated from the rest of your army, so you can't get as much help from support units like staffers and rallybots as you'd really like to. Berserkers and generals, many of which you'll probably have to engage more than once due to Worry Fighter, will seriously chunk your HP pool, and you can't slow down at all or you won't catch the thief. Vulneraries and concoctions only heal 10 and 20 respectively, and you probably don't want to use them every turn since that takes up a valuable action you might prefer to use deleting a threatening enemy to build up guard gauge while reducing the number of attacks you have to survive. Unless you want to splurge on elixirs of all things, you're not guaranteed to be at full health going into a lot of these enemy groups, which is a very dangerous position to put yourself in, not that you have much choice. Before you get any funny ideas, hunkering down with an invincible NOS tank is not a good idea. Their 6 move and tendency to get fenced in by the enemies they leave alive means you simply cannot get the treasure in time that way. I wish you better luck in attack stance, though the stat checks for that get real rough real fast. NOS or no, this will push any Juggernaut to their limits, so your ability to pull something like that off is highly dependent on when you play this map. Leo stands head and shoulders above the level curve when he joins, allowing him to steamroll the unpromoted version of this map. And at level 15, he gets Life Taker, which significantly improves his self-sufficiency. Anywhere in between, including the two most popular times to do a paralogue chain, post 18 and post 20, will put him in a serious bind. Therefore, this is far from a universal strategy. What that means for us, you'll just have to wait and see.
Pathetic. You will, friend! I see all!
Is that all you've got?
This knight can be in one of two possible positions, so the kill can go to either Corrin or Odin. It doesn't matter which.
Whew! Tough one.
The Girly Pops will finish off the last few stragglers for us. All in all, Ninalog's Central Room is actually one of my favorite individual formations in the game, which is no mean feat, especially for a map I've historically been kind of mixed on overall. As we've seen, its large size and strategic enemy placement, especially with Wary Fighter, encourages a mix of player and enemy phase combat, which is seriously fun to unravel, and rare to see in Conquest outside of something like Hans's Room. This formation is actually the main reason I chose specifically Nina's Paralogue to make this video about. Engaging it is one of the most fun approaches to this map and sets you up excellently for the rest of it to boot, especially the eastern hallway a lot of people struggle with. Yet I rarely see anyone actually attempt to fight this squadron, so I wanted to shine a spotlight on it. If you're noticing a pattern, yes, that is very similar to my philosophy towards the main story late game chapters, which it goes without saying was completely intentional. Nyx does not have Move+1, so she wouldn't be able to apply Heartseeker here even with different Beruka positioning. But to compensate, Quick Draw once again comes in clutch, giving her solid strength to get the kill with the more accurate, recently trade-chained Bronze Bow. Factoring Quick Draw into account, she only has one less strength than Niles on average at this point, which is very respectable, and a major help until Sniper's innate hit buff makes the Shining Bow reliable at range. This trait is what makes the arm scroll not necessarily required for a friendship sealed Nyx, and is actually something I totally overlooked for a long time, though that resource still saves you some hassle and opens up a lot of options for her, which is why I've theoretically used it here. This split path of the starting room is an unreasonably big commitment with how long it takes for the two sides to converge, and that's the primary source of Leo's triplets issues. However, that means any strategies that allow you to break that constraint would significantly ease those woes. The physics staff, for instance, can be a godsend to heal the hallway squad in preparation for the reinforcements, since they'll probably be grievously injured after dealing with so many strong enemies. That's a straightforward example, but where things get really interesting is with a certain E-ranked rod. Rescue is by far the most convenient means of moving units between these two sections of the map, and actually has its uses both ways. Since your primary hallway unit, assuming you have one, is under a huge strain, rescuing them the hell out of there once they successfully catch up to the Locktouch Outlaw is a very valid move for sheer survival's sake. Alternatively, rescuing someone else into the left flank will give you the firepower you need to take out the enemies yourself. In a sense, this lets you get the best of both worlds by both sending a large squad to flush out the central room as quickly as possible, while still keeping the left flank relatively locked down. Are there caveats? Absolutely. Ninalog is not a trivial map, so any strategy comes with its trade-offs. But the utility functions of the rescue rod here can open up some completely new avenues of approach that are genuinely worth considering in a lot of situations. Physic and rescue are not, however, the only means of making these two secluded sides interact. This one-tile wall by the chest nook allows you to pull out some interesting stunts which you'll actually end up taking advantage of next turn, so look forward to that. This Outlaw's Lucky 7 makes him annoyingly dodgy, so I've positioned Mozu and Leo in such a way that he'll apply Heartseeker to himself to cancel it out. That's why Mozu's here, by the way. Her power up for Leo is just okay, but her combat is solid enough to make up for it. I like that Odin gets 2-shot by these guys. Jobber Dark Mages are like the weakest enemy type in the world, and he somehow misses 3 separate benchmarks against them without pair up.
Power overflowing! Overdid it again.
This is the famous Axe Knight. Due to an oversight, he's only equipped with an Iron Axe despite not being able to use it until he promotes, so he can't attack. Effie can bully him for a while in this timeline, though if I was playing this map later, I'd have to deal with him legit. I chose not to lunge skip at the beginning of the map because it takes a turn of setup and I didn't have any grounded lunge users. In the central room, however, is another opportunity to phase into the left hallway, one that's much more reasonable to accomplish even with, as seen here, a standard uninvested Beruka, as the target Dark Mage does not deal effective damage against flyers. You don't even have to spend a turn luring him over, he's just standing there, exposed.
Don't even think about it. Alright.
There are a lot of ways you can take advantage of this. Most impactfully, you can skip the entire bottom half of this flank with all its dangerous enemies and intercept the Locked-Touch Outlaw right as he opens the chest. That will leave your lunge pair a bit stranded when the reinforcements show up and the other hallway enemies become aggressive on turn 6, which isn't ideal considering it's the reappearance of the very threatening, say it with me, berserkers and generals, but you have a few ways of dealing with that. Again, Physic and Rescue, and even to some extent the Sun Festal, can save their bacon, but you actually don't need to expend a staff use for this. It's a little tricky, but with careful positioning, you can lunge back into the central room by strategically leaving an enemy alive. This is a pretty useful maneuver if your goal is to lock down the turn constraints, so you can tackle the rest of the map at a much more relaxed pace. Or to just not fight those guys at all, that works too. Back in my reality, I am routing this map, and I've already imposed a different ticking clock on myself, so I'll take advantage of this lunge maneuver in a slightly different way. Specifically, I want Beruka here to give Leo some backup against those oh-so-maligned turn 5 reinforcements. The downside is her hand axe is only 84% accurate, but if necessary, Nyx can gamble with the Shining Bow to take him out. I could actually make his death perfectly reliable with enough strength stacking, but since it's an edge case of an edge case, I decided against it. Feel free to call me names in the comments for that blunder.
Enjoy the afterlife.
While I'm here, I'd like to talk a bit about the boss of this map. As an enemy, without your intervention, Nina will open the Goddess Icon chest on turn 3, then scurry down the left hallway through this door, where you're probably intended to chase her down before she escapes, judging by this breakable wall you can use to your advantage. In my testing, Nina will always prioritize escaping through specifically the west exit above all else. Even if she's literally a turn away from leaving through one of the other exits, she'll never take them. I suspect this is actually a bug of some kind. This door towards the eastern exit serves no purpose for the player, since the breakable wall is always faster, but could theoretically help Nina escape that way if she ever bothered to go there, which implies to me that she was intended to be able to escape from any exit. But as it stands, she won't so much as touch that door for any reason. There are some interesting consequences of this behavior that might catch you off guard if you're not ready for them. First, if all her routes towards the west exit are blocked, she'll start attacking your units, though her targeting priority is a bit questionable. Here she values attacking Nyx, who deals less damage, over anyone who actually blocks her path. This hints that her AI isn't as different from ordinary aggressive AI as you might expect. Keep that in the back of your mind for later. Additionally, if only the top route to that exit is blocked, she'll instead divert herself all the way down to the bottom route that Leo's currently taking. Thus, if you alternate between blocking and not blocking her closest exit while making sure to leave another opening, you can pull off some funny stalling tech. This behavior looks a lot like she's trying to escape from the central room's exit at first glance, and I've even seen players, knowingly in the process of stalling Nina, assume something like that is what's happening. But as we've already established, nope, she never does this. Now that we know all this, is there some way we can take advantage of this information? The answer is yes. Since the top path is blocked, we know Nina's closest route to the west exit involves heading straight down through the candelabras, entering the left hallway from below. In theory, she has 2 equidistant paths she can take to get there, and should choose between going left and right at this intersection at random. But remember the other thing we learned. Despite her goal being fleeing instead of fighting, Nina still holds some vestiges of standard aggressive AI within her, which we can use to our benefit. As we know, aggressive AI prioritizes moving towards your closest clump of units. Therefore, as long as we make sure Nyx and Niles are a good deal closer to her than Peri's squad, we can guarantee she moves left against her own interest, and consistently let those 2 take the killing blow, while still letting Peri's squad make forward progress into the right hallway, unlike the more naive method of eliminating unreliability, which is body blocking Nina from going right entirely. That was a lot. Actually, that's far from how my thought process played out for this move. I presented it as digestible as I could for your sake, but in reality what happened is I noticed her moving left in certain situations was consistent, but didn't know why, so I had to reverse engineer her AI to understand it. And even now I'm only like 70% sure I got it. If attaining your PhD in Fates AI isn't your thing, but you still want to make sure Nina behaves predictably, there's luckily a much more intelligible alternative. On this turn, turn 4, you can trap her in the chest room with a tanky unit at the choke point, either killing her there or simply never leaving. Seriously. The red units only retreat once there are no lock touch enemies left on the map, so if you just never kill Nina, that gives you all the time in the world to route the map, which is ideal if you really want to squeeze everything you can out of the enemies. Something similar can be accomplished by blocking the exits for the other outlaws, but I find it's easiest with Nina since she starts so close to you and doesn't have paths. She will attack you, unlike the other 3, but if you're worried about that, you can defense stack to take 0 damage or completely surround her so she can't move at all. Also, I don't know where else to put this, but if your Nina is inheriting a rally, then ignore everything I just said. Her AI completely breaks. There is a practical use case for this, but I don't want to interact with that black magic. For now, I'll just do the Peri thing. Turn 4 is when the Lock Touch outlaws get their grumpy mitts on the treasure, whether they're promoted or not. This is before you're reasonably expected to have caught up with them, but that's fine since they drop the treasure as long as you kill them before they escape. Peri, like Leo, starts with sub innate sword rank, so she only needs to see 30 combats with swords before she can start using the Levin sword, which is a very valuable tool she'd love to have in her arsenal for the increased firepower. Unlike Leo, she also has a great strength stat, which could be buffed even further by Bloodthirst. This makes her pretty good at using swords when the situation arises, potentially even as her main weapon type if you don't want to use her magic staff for whatever reason. That's not reflected against these bulky knights, but if you want to make this build work with all that entails, it's good to find situations where she can train her sword rank like this regardless. Enemies will prefer not to move when they attack if possible, which circumvents any random enemy movement on the part of this Dark Mage. That takes a bit of the sting out of this 86%. We'll let Niles shoot his daughter here. Heartseeker utility comes in extremely clutch against her 33 Void.
How unfortunate! I guess dreams don't come true.
I assume the game erroneously playing the unit death sound here is common knowledge at this point, but yeah, is that messed up or what? Don't worry, she'll be back. Anyway, that's the goddess icon, which is a great find to patch up the luck of units like Arthur, Camilla, or Niles himself. I'm making Leo take a counterattack here for the reliability of Heartseeker. I had to down a defense tonic for that, but it's a worthy sacrifice. Funnily enough, if he did attack at range, he would just barely live without it thanks to his personal skill, Pragmatic, which I'm almost kind of sad I didn't get to show off. Beruka needs a full guard gauge for the reinforcements. That's bad, because there's a chance this Dark Mage is still at full HP if Beruka missed last turn. So she wouldn't one-tap him and would be forced to block his attack. Luckily, there's a slight optimization I can make here by using the dual club instead of the bronze axe. If she crits, she kills anyway. 18% of the time, it works every time.
Much obliged. Well.
Peri's Malefic Aura lets Corrin get the kill here. I always think it's cool when the aura functionality of that skill comes into play. Transferring Odin away here is just for positioning, otherwise I prefer to kill an attack stance. The Lock Touch Outlaw's AI on this map prioritizes moving as close to, respectively, the chests followed by the escape point as possible. In my testing, the path they take up to turn 3 is identical every time, but I have observed random enemy movement both after and on the same turn as they open the chest, if they have two equidistant paths to choose from. As a consequence, there's a chance this outlaw moves to this tile, if he loots the chest from below and randomly decides to go south instead of west. We don't want that, so Peri occupies that space to guarantee the left path is shorter. It has to be the exact tile, since he has pass, and we can't body block him otherwise. To be honest, this explanation of their AI feels a little unsatisfying to me, but given what I just went through with Nina, it's safe to say that a bit of jank is to be expected. And they're consistent enough for the parts that matter anyway, so I won't look a gift horse in the mouth. If you were questioning why I used Leo specifically as my Juggernaut, besides raw stats, the answer is all these damn knights. Physical dagger users get completely shut down by them, and Xander's not too fun either, so mages are your only real option. Of the common magic Juggernaut builds, standard Dark Knight Leo is by far the freest, hence my preference for him. Theoretically, Vantage builds would perform even better here since they don't have to worry about keeping their health up, but I regret to inform you that, sadly, they suck. The damage stack that Guard Stand's Vantage strategies require comes online obscenely late, much later than most people play Paralogues like this, and Dual Vantage Attack Stance, or DVAS for short, gets hard countered by the paired up reinforcements. Both are also much more restrictive on your team building, so I wouldn't recommend them anyway. We talked big game about the left flank reinforcements already, but the same is also true of the right. I've been caught off guard by forgetting they exist in the past, but luckily if you know they're coming, Dark Mages and Outlaws, or Sorcerers and Adventurers if you prefer, are much easier enemy types to deal with. Xander with Siegfried is an especially good counter for them since he can often just one-shot them, and though they hit on res, they only have 2 actions between them, so he survives pretty handily. Even without him though, we're prepared for both sides. Leo's hallway run is pretty familiar by this point, so here's a hardball question for you. Is any of this even optimal? That's a nebulous thing to define, but the answer I'd like to propose is no, absolutely not. It has its benefits, to be sure, but we didn't have to look far to find a whole host of asterisks to attach to that statement. Like I said, even just playing this map at one of the 2 most popular times to do a paralogue chain makes the strategy significantly more demanding, with Leo or with anyone else. That's not something to be swept under the rug, that's a big deal. We've exhausted this Juggernaut though, so it seems likely that any dissatisfaction on that front will lie not in any small tweak, but in a fundamental change in strategy. Luckily, I have just the solution for you, and it starts with something seemingly completely unrelated. You see, you don't actually have to engage with the left side of the central room immediately. That lets you divert the chunk of your main army that would otherwise be occupied with them to assist in the flank, and those extra warm bodies make this hallway significantly less taxing. It's already this much easier with a measly Beruka to assist us, so just imagine that 5 or 6-fold. This division of labor is arguably better for a variety of reasons, most measurably being it allows you to better distribute XP to your training projects without sacrificing any of the other metrics I care about. It'll play out a little differently than mine, but an 8-turn route remains very achievable. I won't get into all the nitty-gritty particulars with this strategy to avoid making this video even longer than it already is, but I will recommend you discover them yourself by trying this game plan next time you play this map, especially if you value similar metrics to me. But the question remains, why did I Juggernaut with Leo in the first place? Well, because I'm a content creator. I replan my clears entirely for the benefit of my videos, but that makes me uniquely susceptible to otherwise benign inconsistencies like random enemy movement. which would essentially force me to butterfly effect an entire alternate clear from the aftermath, and the strategy I'd like to approach this version of the clear with opens me up to a lot of that. Rather than play around that, I decided to make things easier on myself. Luckily, most of you, to my knowledge, aren't content creators, so with a more reactive playstyle, this is a pretty rewarding way to approach the map. Nyx and Niles are going to take this top path to meet the turn 7 reinforcements. There are a couple other reasons you might want to do so too. For instance, this is a pretty natural method to avoid taking the bottom path entirely. If you're quick enough, you can meet the leftmost Lock Touch Outlaw right before he escapes and block his exit just in the nick of time. It's a bit tight and worse for turns, but this is what I would recommend if you're less confident in your guerrilla tactics. It lets you use your full army for the central room, then split up into 2 medium-sized groups for the flanks, so you'll never suffer from being outnumbered, which is of major or minor concern to pretty much every other method of playing this map legit. For completeness' sake, there are 2 other methods to my knowledge to deal with the left side's Lock Touch Outlaw without taking the bottom path, though he'll realistically be an adventurer by the time you can use them. The first and more practical of the 2 is Entrap. Yep, does what it says in the box. But as a Beering staff, you have very limited means to use it this early in the campaign, and no matter when you play this map, that staff fit is very questionable against their high resistance. The second is the Spy's Shuriken. 3 range is one hell of a drug, but that weapon isn't available until Chapter 26, the absolute latest point you're allowed to play any Paralogues, so this will only come into play for a tiny minority of Ninologue clears. At that point, you're probably not that fussed about the rewards from this map. Give it a try if you have the chance though, it's really funny. I recorded both of these tricks on turn 2, which still removes the time pressure, but if you don't want to have to double back for the treasure yourself, I'd recommend using them after the adventurer opens the chest for you to get it early.
That was too easy.
The easiest of the optional treasures to obtain is also probably the reason you're playing this map in the first place, the Partner Seal. Normally, you can only get 3 before unlocking the Tier 3 shops, but certain optional chapters give you more as a reward. In Conquest, that's Sophie, Nina, and Siegbert's Paralogues. But Siegbert's dad joins way too late to be able to unlock that map within a reasonable time frame, so realistically, if you want one, you're picking between Sophie and Nina's, and if you want 2, you're playing both. Personally, if I had to pick just one, I would choose Nina's Paralogue. Since shared route Paralogues like Sophie's are huge XP feeding grounds, I prefer to save for later in the game. There's good reason to want a 4th or 5th partner seal before Chapter 21. While it's true for individual units that marriage classes are more contested than heart and friendship classes, in the context of a full army, someone is marrying Camilla, and compared to the 3 possible friends per unit, you have way more varied combinations for marriages. Camilla, Beruka, Mozu, and Niles all give near universally applicable marriage classes for almost any unit of a different gender. Azura's Sky Knight and Kaze's Ninja are also very widely useful, if not quite as universal, and several specific pairings, like Elise with Odin, Charlotte with Keaton, and Peri with Xander, to name a few, can be game changers for individual units. So I can think of a lot of situations where an additional partner seal would be a big help to my army in the mid-game. For example, I wouldn't have had to bench Jakob in my previous playthrough. Of course, since marriages take longer to build than any other reclassing methods, there's a solid chance you'll be close enough to unlocking infinite seals by the time you finish your support chains to prefer just waiting a few maps, which is totally valid. All in all though, the partner seal is a major advantage Ninologue has over something like Ophelia or Percy's Paralogues, particularly the formers. Even if you don't agree with my radical anti-Ophelia log reward stance, at the very least, the rewards aren't as time-sensitive to be useful. You don't lose much by getting the Horse Spirit and Calamity Gate after Chapter 20 instead of 14, when you can fulfill most of the same tasks with the Fire Tome. The exception is arguably Chapter 17, which I have a whole tangent saved up for, but I don't have to use it up here, because you know what's better than Calamity Gate on that map? Nina! Meanwhile, you gained a lot from getting an additional seal that early, which is much less replaceable.
Is that all your blood? Yay!
depending on Beruka's HP, this fighter might attack either her or Mozu. They both have full guard gauge, so it barely matters. We're getting a lot out of Bloodthirst again here. Peri works incredibly well with Azura, since she A, has shelter, and B, can get sunk to after killing an enemy to take those Bloodthirst buffs to a huge enemy group like this one. I can't stress this enough, she doubles Outlaws as a Dark Knight with no speed backpack, tonic, or meal. What a goat. This Outlaw Dark Mage pair always chooses to attack with the benefit of terrain, keeping their movements consistent, which helps for next turn. This is a rare case of Peri not one-rounding because of the Dark Mage's resistance pair-up. We're pretty much just on cleanup duty at this point. What that cleanup looks like is gonna vary a lot based on your previous moves, so that's something you'll have to use your own discretion for. Anyway, since there's finally some dead air in our clear, I might as well take the opportunity to yap about Nina as a unit. Statistically, this rotten girl is usually a slightly stronger but slower version of her dad. She also has the same class set as both Niles and Nyx, Outlaw and Dark Mage, which I have highly praised in the past. But I don't find myself using her nearly as much as those two because of her later join time. Niles and Nyx highly benefit from being able to contribute in the early game when bows are at their peak, and being able to skill dip and build supports and weapon ranks as soon as you like, notably including very valuable friendships. Nina, and all second generation units, lack these traits, so it feels more difficult to get her into the rewarding, higher investment builds I'm so fond of for Outlaws, even if I do give her, for example, a Wyvern Bomb, which I often do. The earliest she's likely to be able to make meaningful contributions is Chapter 17, which is admittedly quite good, but far less unique in comparison. This is far from a condemnation of Nina as a unit, however. She's still definitely one of the better second generation units. It just means she'll probably be more suited to plug low investment holes in your army. Luckily, that's not hard for her to do. There's really no such thing as a bad mom for Nina, since she can be either a physical or a magical attacker, and she'll always have solid combat classes, particularly Bow Knight, at her disposal. If you want slightly more out of Nina, the most success I've had with her, unsurprisingly, was giving her the highly sought after Azura Mother and reclassing her to Kinchi Knight to allow her to keep using her innate bow rank and benefit from Azura's great strength inheritance, which she does very well with Move +1. That skill makes most things she can be doing fairly unique on their own, which sets her apart from a lot of other Gen 2 units, but if you want that even more so, she can get Definer if Nyx is her mom due to Parallel Clash shenanigans, making her the only named unit to do so in Conquest. Though that pairing is a bit more iffy on the first generation front. If I was feeling uncharitable, I'd describe Nina as a budget Nyx, and while it's true that her highs definitely aren't as high, she doesn't have as low lows either, so it balances out. Besides, Nyx-type units are the kinds you benefit from using several of anyway. Overall, Nina is pretty solid, and you'll never feel sad about another Outlaw, assuming you didn't sacrifice any footwear for them. A lot of Gen 2 units struggle with subpar availability or inability to stand out from their father, and while Nina's no different, Niles at least has the decency to be a top 10 unit, and his unique traits make a great baseline for Nina to build off of. Peri intentionally lured this Outlaw over last turn without one-rounding, so she could get Bloodthirst off him now. If she missed earlier, Corrin chips him down with the Bronze Sword before she takes the kill.
Is that all you got?
You have a lot more time to spare against the Southeast Outlaw than the Western one. That wiggle room is nice in case you get held up in the Central Room or against the paired up reinforcements. Killing him gives us 3,000 gold, which is probably the second best reward on this map. It's not as flashy as the Partner Seal, but it's a tidy sum that, depending on when you play this map, can serve as a much needed cash infusion for the spending spree associated with the Tier 2 shops.
What a fight!
You saved me. Appearance.
Nyx is not the only unit capable of using the Shining Bow. Niles, Nina herself, and occasionally Odin are solid mixed attackers that benefit from the high might, unrestricted 1-2 range, and ability to hit on resistance. All 4 of those units also have easy access to hit boosting skills to make up for its 70 hits, as Nyx's Heartseeker has helpfully demonstrated for us. Man, I'd kill for a second one of those things.
accomplished.
And so I did. Nice. Wait, the map isn't over? Who's left? Oh, right. Go, Effie, go! And everyone cheered. So, there you have it. Nina's Paralogue fully routed in 8 turns, the absolute fastest such a feat can be accomplished. As an added bonus, we got a solid overview of several different strategies you could use to approach this map, which was the real treasure from all this. I've been fairly critical to how the structure of this map impacts the nitty-gritty tactics, but to give these hallways some credit, tactics and strategy are not the same thing, and I really enjoy the variety of broad-scope approaches we've uncovered in this video. What ratio you send your units to a full frontal assault versus the sneaky flank, how you tackle the large open-ended central room and where you go from there, and taking advantage of your limited tools to connect your isolated forces, Ninologue is designed to get you thinking about all sorts of decisions like this, resulting in some of the most densely packed strategy building in this strategy video game. And none of it would have worked if not for this manner's twisted layout. Though some elements occasionally annoy me, Nina's Paralogue is a seriously well-designed map, not in spite of its geometry, but because of it, which is genuinely not the conclusion I expected to reach going into this video. Even the endurance check nature of these hallways builds a tense anticipation you won't find anywhere else. But what do you all think? This video was a bit of an experiment, and took a lot of work to put together, so any feedback on the format would be very much appreciated. And hey, I certainly wouldn't be opposed to going over more Paralogues in a similar style eventually. Secrets in particular is a map I'd love to shine a spotlight on, though that's nowhere near my immediate priority list. Don't worry, I know when I have too much on my plate. I promise I'm still working on stuff, so thanks for being patient, and hopefully you'll hear from me again soon.